Okay. Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Exploring the Lord of the Rings. This is session number 150 today, and it's good to be here with you all. I think it's session number 26 on the Council of Elrond, so we are proceeding through at approximately the pace we all expected. So welcome back. Tonight we get to the charming bromance of Aragorn and Gollum. But actually, in setting up for that, we have a selection from our discussion board that I wanted to share. But first, one announcement tonight, and that is I wanted to remind everybody about Mythmoot, which is coming up very soon. And I want to make sure everybody knows about this and has the opportunity, because indeed this year everybody does have the opportunity to attend with us. Mythmoot, of course, is the big annual conference of Signum University. It is just a wonderful gathering. This year, we are going completely online with Mythmoot. Unfortunately, I really held out against that as long as we could, but we couldn't hold out any longer. And so instead, we're just going to make it about the most awesome online conference that's ever been. So there are two enrollment levels to Mythmoot, and it basically should be determined if you're wondering, okay, so there's Mootcast and there's Moot Hub, and if you're wondering like which one should I sign up for, or what's the difference between Mootcast and Moot Hub, essentially the primary difference I would say is whether or not you're able to join us in real time. Because if you're not able to join us in real time, then you should do Mootcast. Basically, Mootcast gives you the ability to see all of the presentations, and also there's an archived recording of all the presentations. So if you can jump in on a few of them live, that's awesome. That's really cool, because then you could even get questions answered and stuff like that. But if you can't, that's okay, because as I said, there's going to be a published archive of all of the recorded sessions. So that's really cool. However, if you are able to participate between August 6th and August 9th, which are the official days of Mythmoot, then you'll be able to participate in a great deal more than you are able to get through Mootcast. Moot Hub means that you are part of the whole buzzing activity of the conference, and you get to participate not only in the regular sessions, the regular paper sessions and presentations, but you also get to take part in all the cool informal social stuff. You get to have special Q&A sessions with our speakers. You get to hang out with folks, do our costume contest, do our pub trivia contest, and we're going to have whole dedicated social channels and everything where we're really hoping to sort of make connections as much as possible. This is what Moot Hub is really about, trying to preserve the thing that we look forward to every year, getting a chance to connect with people at Mythmoot. This is the one thing that I was really, really hoping for and sort of trusting in when we made this decision, that I wanted to lose that as little as possible, because of course we do online events all the time. That's kind of what we do, every day of the year. Mythmoot is a special opportunity for connection, and so I'm really excited about how that's going to work out. So if you're able to join us live during those days, the 6th through the 9th of August, which is just in a couple weeks now, I definitely encourage you to sign up for Moot Hub, because it's going to be really, really cool. But again, if you can't, Mootcast will get you access to all of the big stuff that you would really want to make sure you didn't miss. So anyway, that's what we're talking. Yeah, it's a couple weeks, JJ. Yeah, exactly. It's a couple weeks. It's like 9 days from now. It's a week and then a little more than that. So okay, I'll compromise with you, JJ, on 1.5 weeks. That's fine. It is a week and a half from now, and it's pretty cool. I'm getting excited. I'm leading 2 sessions at Mythmoot. I'm I'm leading 2 poetry discussion sessions. We're going to do some hardcore poetry analysis in these 2 sessions. One on some Tolkien poems that I don't really understand very well, so I'm really looking forward to working through them with folks. And then I'm going to do another session on my newest passion, that poetic genre that I have recently discovered, which is just one of the most amazing, beautiful, and remarkable linguistic genres in the history of verse that I know of. And that is, of course, rap. So we're going to be talking about the prosody of rap, working through some of that because I'm still trying to master it. It's so complicated. Anyway, I'm really excited doing some poetic analysis. I can't wait for Verlin Flieger's talk and Amy Sturgis's talk, and we're going to perform Verlin Flieger's new play for the first time ever. So that's going to be really fun. No, JJ, we did not actually get Eminem as a guest speaker this year. Doubt that's going to happen, actually, but you know, someday I would actually be really interested to have a conversation with him, especially now that he's sober these days. But anyway, let's let's get back to Tolkien here. But I just did want to remind everybody again, Mootcast and Moot Hub. You can do Moot. You can sign up for them, you know, right up until the day. There's no limit. But of course, sooner is better. We actually are going to, as Dora Ward was just saying, the Moot Hub social platform is actually going to be opened up this weekend, so we can kind of start pre-gaming for the conference a few days in advance, actually. So that's going to be really fun. Yeah. So Turambar, there are now. This is it is true that if you're in Europe, a lot of the things are going to be at some awkward time zones, no question, but not all. There will be some that will definitely be within your range. So again, you can choose if you think that there's going to be enough that you'll be able to be around for, because really most of the events will be prior to midnight Europe time. The majority of things. Some of them will be after. I mean, there will be some evening events, of course, anyway, yeah, and so Mario, actually, there is a preliminary schedule posted now. There's a preliminary schedule, or there's a sort of an overview schedule posted on the webpage. And you get, there it is. There you go. Druid's Fire posted the link to the schedule there. And there will be, for those who have registered, there's going to be more detailed details with more information about stuff. So that is that should be emailed around pretty soon. Oh, and Nancy was asking about brief results of the symposium on the humanities. Oh man, that was awesome. So we had our summit on the teaching of the humanities last Saturday. It was so good. It was so good. We had about 40 scholars from different disciplines around the humanities. We had a great day. It was a really vigorous discussion. We're planning actually to have some follow-up discussions as we continue to kind of work through things. Our plan from here is we're actually going to be working to publish a concept paper in which we outline what are some of the things that we think are holding back the humanities in the current system. What are some of the core principles that we think we would want to see done differently with the humanities, and then some specific examples of how we think that should be done. So those are, we're hoping to actually get together and write that stuff up so that we can circulate it and broaden this discussion even further, because we at Signum certainly think that the humanities, well, a lot more could be done with the humanities. The humanities could certainly be done a lot better. That would often seem like a controversial statement, except for the fact that in so many places, people are stopping even doing the humanities at all. So it kind of seems fairly safe to say that it could be done better. Could be done better than institutions that have given up on doing them at all. Yeah, I think that's a non-controversial statement. Anyway, yeah. So it's it's going to be great. It was a wonderful conversation, and really looking forward to the follow-ups and the outcomes from that. That's going to be a lot of fun as we continue moving forward, of course, ultimately hoping towards the final goal of opening our own undergraduate humanities program at Signum University. That's the goal that we're working towards, with the dedication and all of the swiftness that we can muster. Well, no, that's not true. We are working with all of the swiftness into that we can drag the system along with us on. That's really our restriction. But anyway, yeah. Actually, Veronica, I remember when UC Berkeley used to be known for its humanities. Much less so now, right? That's not, it's not on those grounds that they're competing with Stanford anymore, really. But Nancy says, I don't think they like humans much anymore. Ouch. Fair enough, though. I know what you mean. But anyway, let us get back to, we chat all evening, which of course is kind of what we will be doing at Mythmoot. But let's get back to the Council of Elrond. We're never going to get through it here. So today we get to Gollum. As a segue into Aragorn, I wanted to look at a first-time post from a new listener who's recently been catching up with us. So that was always something that I enjoy celebrating. Anyway, so it says, anyway, I have worked my way up to episode 140, and in the discussion about Aragorn smiling, you remember we were talking about the smiling of Aragorn, I became curious about this. The gist of the conversation, in the class that is, was that Aragorn does not smile much, and therefore it is of note when it is said that he smiles. This both fit and didn't fit with my impression of Aragorn. Yes, he's grim, and the times he smiles feel like they're important. But I also have this image of him smiling clear in my head, so I did some searching and counted how many times he's described as smiling in the text. And then I looked at all the instances of smile being used and which characters were smiling. My ebook gave me 76 instances of smile in the whole book, appendices included. 21 characters smile once, and 2 of them are also said to not smile, so that accounts for 23 of the instances. The remaining characters who smile more than once are Elrond, Glóin, and Sam smile twice each, Bilbo and Theoden 3 times each, Frodo and Galadriel 4 times each, Faramir 5 times, Gandalf 6 or 7. That is, remember, there's the dubious one is the one where Saruman says, "Pray do not smile at me," right? And so it's like, is he actually smiling? I think he's probably smiling, but it's indirect, right? So anyway, and then Aragorn 14 or 15 times. In the tale of Aragorn and Arwen, it says he became grim to look at unless he chanced to smile. So that, again, not a definitive record of him smiling, just a discussion of him smiling. Now, Ragnell goes on. Aragorn smiles more than any of them, it seems. Now, it can be that the narrator mentions Aragorn smiles more than others because it seems remarkable that he should smile. And I also thought I saw something of a pattern of when characters smile. There are, for example, no smiles in the field of Cormelin, which I would imagine would be a smiling occasion, and all of Frodo's smiles are on the border of Mordor. It looks like the characters' smiles are more likely to be mentioned when the general situation, or maybe in Aragorn's case, makes smiles to be unlikely or not expected. Now, this is not a perfect pattern, and all the smiles do not follow it, but can it be that smiling is a way the characters keep up their spirits when things are looking grim? Or that the narrator is signaling something to us? There is hope, they can still smile? I am reminded of the description of Aragorn in the tale of Aragorn and Arwen. His face was sad and stern because of the doom that was laid on him, and yet hope dwelt ever in the depths of his heart, from which mirth would arise at times like a spring from the rock. Excellent. I think is Ragnell, thank you for that post. I think that's really, really interesting, and I love the idea. My favorite nugget, actually, in the whole, first of all, the fact that Aragorn gets more smiles than anybody else is really, really interesting. But my favorite nugget there is the fact that all 4 times Frodo is described as smiling are on the borders of Mordor. That's really, really interesting and really cool. And I think it does have something to do with hope. It certainly makes a good deal of sense. Now, someone, and I think it was Anthony, in response to this on the discussion board, was pointing out that there are some characters who are clearly jovial, right? Who are clearly fun-loving guys who don't make the list, right? Who are not described as smiling much at all. Merry and Pippin being clearest examples. Now, like, do they I'm pretty sure Pippin smiles. Feel pretty confident about that, right? Yeah, Aranos, that was you. That's what I thought. So I totally agree. There's no question that Pippin spends a great deal of his time smiling, right? And yet he doesn't get those references, and Aragorn gets. So does this mean that Aragorn smiles 14 to 15 times more often in general than Pippin does? No, that's clearly absurd, right? That can't be so. And so therefore, it certainly does suggest to me that when the narrative mentions the smiles, it is significant in some way, right? Significant, not necessarily always by contrast necessarily, but that it often should be so, makes sense. Like Frodo smiling when he's on the borders of Mordor. I'm sure he smiled often, when they were walking in the Shire as well, but he is described, the smile is described more. More attention is drawn to it on the borders of Mordor. So that, I think, is a very interesting pattern to observe. And therefore, I think that does seem to me to contextualize Aragorn's smiles. He is grim. He is grim of face. And that's fairly persistent in him. And as we saw, when we were watching Aragorn attempt to do hobbitry and kind of fail, right? I mean, it was pretty weak. I mean, he's just not good at it. It's not his mode. As we saw, Elrond is better at it than he is, right? It's just not how Aragorn rolls. But at the same time, it's not that he never does smile, but so it makes sense that more attention would be drawn to his smiles when he smiles. And I love this quote there at the end, from which mirth would arise at times like a spring from the rock, right? It's not that there's no mirth within him. It's not that he's boring. It's not that he's always serious, but he is sad and stern, right? But there is hope dwelling in his heart, and mirth does arise from that. Gandalf, of course, is very mercurial in this way as well. He is swift in anger, swift to laugh, right, as Frodo's eulogy song will say of him. And that strikes me as similar. Gandalf is more volatile than Aragorn, but only because Aragorn is more steady on the grim side, right, than Gandalf is. Yeah. Interesting. Matt was just looking up grin, and says that Frodo grins while in disguise amidst the orc horde in Mordor, which again reinforces the idea that mirth is mentioned when it's worth mentioning, right? When it means something, especially in those kinds of contexts. Yeah, I think that's real. And so again, I think this tells us something about Aragorn's character. Not that, hey, we're giving Aragorn a bad rap. He's really like quite cheerful all the time, right? Look at how much he smiles. No, again, it's because those do mean something, right? That it's significant when he does smile. And so more attention is drawn to it. No one's going to go out of their way to say, and Pippin was smiling. Of course Pippin was smiling, right? He's usually smiling. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Marielle is pointing out a similar dynamic. She says she's in the middle of her annual Pride and Prejudice reread. I just did mine a little while back, Marielle. It says it almost every adaptation very carefully rations Mr. Darcy's smiles, and they're always significant. Yes, it's true. Absolutely. Interesting. Now, Tony, that's a fascinating follow-up question. Tony says, I wonder if this is why people think elves are permanently grave, because their smiles are not mentioned. But of course, Tony, by this reasoning, right, by the reasoning that Ragnall's post suggests, it would be in fact the opposite, right? That their smiles would not be mentioned so often because they smile so frequently. Again, we see how we do get, Lupilia, many references to their laughter, right? Which does lead me to suspect that they're smiling quite a bit. Don't you get the impression that Gildor is smiling quite a lot, right? I mean, and I get the impression that Elrond is smiling quite a bit, and goodness knows, if there's anybody living in Middle-earth who, you know, has the excuse for some grimness, Elrond has been through a lot in his life. You know, his troubles are still not over, but he's been through a lot in his long life, and yet even he seems to have less grimness in his overall outlook than Aragorn does. Exactly, Fourth Dauntless. No one who is kind as Christmas can be perpetually frowny. Exactly. Exactly. Kind as Christmas, or as kind as summer in the second edition of The Hobbit. But yeah, I mean, I think, Tony, that this is this is one of the reasons why I tend to resist. I like to resist the people who are resistant to the Tralalalali poems. People who think that the Tralalalali thing is just ridiculous and doesn't fit. That it's an embarrassing misfit with the way that, you know, so, you know, Tolkien in his sort of immature early work, right, depicted elves in this sort of frivolous, silly way, right? And then later on in The Lord of the Rings, when they, you know, sort of like his, you know, depiction of them altered, then, you know, he, you know, regretted it and kind of went back on that. And I've never agreed with that. I mean, first of all, there's very little historical backing to it, right? I mean, by the time he wrote The Hobbit, he was already very serious indeed about the elves, right? And almost everything, the Nirnaeth Arnoediad, the kinslaying, you know, Feanor, everything from, you know, almost all the major stories of the Silmarillion, Beren and Luthien, was already there. The Fall of Gondolin, all this stuff existed. But Torah Marthin, and that's, I can never help but think of that when people object to the Tralalalali song, right? That thinking elves are silly is a very silly thing to think. A slight paraphrase of the line from chapter 3 of The Hobbit, that, like, the reaction that people have to that chapter is depicted in that chapter, right? When the dwarves are, like, take themselves really seriously and object to the frivolous way in which the elves are carrying on, right? And it seems like so many readers are still in the same place. Yeah. So anyhow, I do think that that's an interesting thing, that there are very few, the majority of the elves that we meet. Perhaps the reason that we don't hear about them smiling more often than we do is because they're like Pippin, right? They're always smiling. And if we go back for a second, notice that Galadriel gets 4, right? She's nothing near the Aragorn strata, right, as far as number of smiles mentioned. But you can see she's on the upper end, right? She's not down with Pippin, but it's true, Scudo, that she's not in the story very long. So maybe if she got more screen time, right, if she were in the narrative more often, she would be up there, right? So maybe I guess we'd have to do the ratios, right, how many smiles per page of narrative, right? Does Galadriel get? If we consider not the total gross number of smiles, but the rate of smiles, right? Maybe Galadriel's actually higher than Aragorn. But again, my point is that I think it's the same thing, right? I think it's that Galadriel certainly seems very great and very grave, and I mean, to me, Galadriel is the least tra-la-la-la-ish of all of the elves, right? Well, maybe Celeborn. I don't know. But anyway, neither one of them seem particularly tra-la-la-la-ish, but perhaps, again, her smiles are mentioned as often as they are, the 4 times in those couple chapters, because because she does it. Tolkien felt like he needed to mention them, right? Because she doesn't seem like she's having as much fun, even as people like Gildor, or even Glorfindel, seems like he's having a little more fun than Galadriel does. Yeah, cool. Okay, all right. Anyway, thank you again, Ragnelf. That was really fun. And now let's go on to a scene in which Aragorn does not smile in at the time or in memory. His encounter with Gollum. So remember, Gandalf had just said that, like, into what dangers he had gone alone. He didn't like to think. And here's Aragorn's response. "There is little need to tell of them," said Aragorn. "If a man must needs walk in sight of the Black Gate or tread the deadly flowers of Morgul Vale, then perils he will have. I too despaired at last, and I began my homeward journey. And then, by fortune, I came suddenly on what I sought, the marks of soft feet beside a muddy pool. But now the trail was fresh and swift, and it led not to Mordor, but away. Along the skirts of the dead marshes I followed it, and then I had him. Lurking by a stagnant mere, peering in the water as the dark eve fell, I caught him, Gollum. He was covered with green slime. He will never love me, I fear, for he bit me, and I was not gentle. Nothing more did I ever get from his mouth than the marks of his teeth. I deemed it the worst part of all my journey, the road back, watching him day and night, making him walk before me with a halter on his neck, gagged, until he was tamed by lack of food and drink. By lack of drink and food, driving him ever towards Mirkwood. I brought him there at last and gave him to the elves, for we had agreed that this should be done, and I was glad to be rid of his company, for he stank. For my part, I hoped never to look upon him again, but Gandalf came and endured long speech with him." Yes, as Karina, I agree. "He will never love me" is a pretty big understatement there. Fairly comical understatement there, I think. Okay, so what do you make of this? So there are a bunch of things to notice. One thing, and I want to mention this first, not because I think it's most important, but perhaps because it's least. One thing that I notice in reading through this here is a bunch of things that seem to be taken up, either to take up ideas from the later story, which I think is more likely, or to be taken up in the later story, which I think less likely. I say that because I am pretty sure that this passage was written after the later passages were written, but if I'm remembering correctly, it was. I don't think this passage was there before. But anyway, remembering ahead, right? Gollum does not want to go around the edges of the dead marshes. He wants to go straight through the middle, right? Well, last time he skirted around the edge of the marshes, he got caught, right, by Aragorn. Gollum is covered with green slime, right? Which, of course, I can't help but remember. I can't help but remember the discussion about the faces, right? only images to see, not to touch, right? We tried to touch them once. Yes, I tried once, he says. I'm wondering, again, if it's not recently after that experience that Aragorn caught him here. And that's why Gollum is covered with green slime when he comes upon when he comes upon him here. Of course, also, there's the image of the forced march, right? Aragorn reports that he made Gollum walk before me with a halter on his neck, gagged until he was tamed by lack of drink and food. Two things in that sentence, of course, make me remember ahead, right, to the Two Towers. First, making him walk with a halter on his neck, with a rope tied around his neck, right? And of course, that's exactly what Frodo and Sam are going to do. It would seem following Aragorn's example. But of course, the difference is Aragorn, doesn't have an elf rope woven in Lorien, right? Tying him with a mundane rope seemed to be merely, an annoyance to Gollum. Yeah, and I agree, Praise. He's gagged primarily because he's tried to bite him, right? Aragorn not only cannot trust him not to run away, but he can't trust him not to bite him if he leaves his mouth uncovered. So yeah, absolutely. But the last thing is tamed by lack of food and by lack of drink and food. We will remember that, again, remembering ahead, very soon after Gollum's capture by Frodo and Sam, he is going to go off for food. And Frodo is going to realize they're going to have to let him go off for food. The fact that he, comes back, trust Smeagol now, he says, right? This is, what can Aragorn do? What can Aragorn do, right? He can't, Gollum won't not bite him, right? He has to have his mouth covered, and he tries to bite him every time he lets him go. He can't trust him to go away like Frodo does, and even Sam trusts him, right? Trusts him to some extent, trusts to luck even more, right? Trusts to Providence, acts on his hope, but it helps to emphasize the differences there. All I'm saying is we will need to remember this passage when we get there in the Two Towers, because this is a really important context, I think. An important context. Now, you're right. Edith and Tony are talking about Aragorn not having the ring to hold over Gollum's head, and that's true. But again, I don't think that that's an automatic thing. Indeed, if anything, you would think Frodo being a Baggins who is B holding Gollum's precious away from him would make Gollum more feral and untrustworthy rather than less, right? That if, one would easily say if Aragorn had his hands full with Gollum as prisoner, surely that must only be worse for Frodo under his circumstances, right? But it's not exactly the same. So we just have to remember this contrast, right? Obviously, there are reasons, and of course, the ring is involved in that. But that's my point. When we get there, we need to remember that this is a baseline that's getting established, right? A baseline for Gollum's behavior. Here's how Gollum behaves when he is being compelled to do something against his will, when he's been captured, right? This is how he behaves. Savagely. Savagely, relentlessly, using all of his wile and all of his strength to attempt to escape by any means, right? That's Gollum's sort of normal behavior. We know that his behavior with Frodo and Sam is not normal for him. And this is one of the main ways that we know. And it's interesting because this is the only time, almost only time, we ever even hear indirectly of Gollum's behavior outside the presence of the ring. We only ever see Gollum acting when he is with Bilbo or when he's with Frodo. We get very, very little, even indirect description of Gollum's words, behavior, activities when he's not interacting with one of the ring bearer. Yeah, and again, people, please understand, I'm not saying that his change of attitude and action around Frodo is inexplicable. I understand where it's coming from. I'm just saying we need to remember not to take it for granted, right? We need to remember not to take it for granted, just to remember this as a baseline, because again, the parallel here is pretty clear. So clear that I feel pretty confident that Frodo and Sam are themselves remembering it, right? That the forcing him to walk with a halter around his neck. I think that that's why Frodo, as narrator, comments on the fact that Sam is gentler than his words, right? When Frodo checks the rope after Gollum starts screaming, he finds that, you know, Sam was talking big, but he actually tied it fairly gently, right? He did not tie it tightly. Yeah, good. Yeah, distant rumors of the woodman, mad violence, but even that's not really an account, right? We are told that they have heard rumors of him, but that's all we're told, right? We're not even told. We don't even hear a third-hand story, right? Like Gandalf recounting a story that a woodman told him about what happened when he saw Gollum, right? We don't even get that. So yeah, this is one of the closest things that we get to this kind of what's normal, right? What kind of behavior would be normal for Gollum under these circumstances? Yeah. Okay. Anyway, I say this not because I'm wanting to talk about what goes on between Frodo and Sam and Gollum there yet. I'm just saying this bears upon that. So I wanted to draw attention to it so that we remember to come back to that when we get there several years from now. Okay, that was the first thing I wanted to talk about there. The second thing I want to talk about here is... Well, let's start back at the beginning. Aragorn on his journey. If a man must needs walk in sight of the Black Gate or tread the deadly flowers of Morgul Vale, then perils he will have. What do we learn from that? Couple things I think we can learn from that. What does Aragorn do when Gandalf leaves? When Aragorn is now on his own, right, no longer hampered by this wizard, right, and able to get down to some real tracking, as we were talking about before, what's his plan? Aranas, yeah, exactly. He checks the borders, the entries. It seems to me fairly clear that Aragorn immediately suspects that Gollum went in to Mordor. Right? He clearly, that Gandalf said that they saw signs that he stayed there for some time, right? They found his like lair or whatever, wherever it was he was staying when he was sort of living there in the sort of greater Ithilien area, right? But exactly, he does search the exits or entrances for any sign, for any evidence that Gollum came in or out. Now, I don't know that this means that this is, you know, a private theory of Aragorn's not shared by Gandalf. I don't think that we have enough evidence to conclude something like that. Yeah, Sam asks, wouldn't it be helpful to bring a Gandalf into Mordor? Well, maybe, maybe not. I mean, Gandalf might be more readily perceptible to the enemy? I don't know. I mean, Gandalf did sneak into Dol Guldur, so I guess he's got some history of that. You know, Gandalf can apparently be stealthy when he wants to be stealthy. But in any case, again, I don't think we have reason to believe that Aragorn was like, again, like that Gandalf was, I mean, I was joking about that, but I don't think that Gandalf was really holding Aragorn back, and he's like, phew, okay, now I'm on my own. But in any case, clearly he is thinking of the entrances, and he's thinking of both, right? Morgul Vale. Why would he go to Morgul Vale? Because he thinks Gollum might have done. Does that mean that he's thinking of Cirith Ungol specifically? Maybe. Perhaps. Does he suspect that maybe Gollum was captured by the Nazgul and taken to Morgul Vale? That could happen, right? In fact, that's what does happen to Frodo and Sam in the earliest drafts of the material that becomes the end of Book 4. When Frodo and Sam are initially captured, Frodo, anyway, is initially captured, he's taken to Minas Morgul, not to the Tower of Cirith Ungol, but to Minas Morgul, because he's captured downstairs, not upstairs. But yeah, I definitely, it definitely seems that he's wanting to eliminate that possibility, whether Gollum was taken there or not. Yeah. Yeah. And yes, Tarloniel, I'm sure he's finally seizing this opportunity to take that pleasure trip to the Black Gate that he's always wanted to do, right? I hear the Morgul Vale is lovely this time of year. Yeah. And I wonder, Tony says it seems a bit desperate, like a last hope. That is possible, right? I mean, it's, you know, he admits, Tony, of course, that after that, right after this, he gives up. So this does seem to be his last resort. Sorry, that would be a good subtitle, right? Morgul Vale, the last resort in so many ways. Yeah. Put that at the very end of your bucket list, Ambrosius. Absolutely the last item on your bucket list. Yeah. And Nancy, I agree. The deadly flowers, the reference to the flowers, right? Tread the deadly flowers of Morgul Vale. By the way, I have always found that that phrase to be very disturbing, creepy, moving in some ways. Anyway, had he described something horrible, right? Or like, you know, tread the like viscous slime of Morgul Vale, or like cut through the hideous webs of Morgul Vale, or whatever. Like, it could have been impressive, right? But there's nothing quite so eerie, right? The eeriness and the it speaks so clearly of corruption, right? There are flowers there, but they're deadly flowers, right? That even beauty itself is twisted in the Morgul Vale. It's yeah, really horrible. Rinroos and Michael D are saying they always thought of the Wizard of Oz when they heard that part. Okay, I can understand that association. Yeah, Tony also. I can understand that association. I don't think I had that association, but I can't be sure I didn't. As I'm pretty sure I watched The Wizard of Oz before I read The Lord of the Rings. Pretty sure I did. Definitely saw it at my grandparents' house when I was a kid, so pretty sure. Yeah. Anyway, okay. Does this suggest that this is the time when he had a run-in with Nazgul, which he shudders to remember, literally shudders to remember, at Bree. That seems to me possible. Also, his reluctance to talk about it, right? JJ, exactly. This is where he gets his prosthetic wooden feet. Exactly. Not Strider, Trotter, the Hobbit, whose character was replaced by Aragorn, but yeah, who had been tortured by the Nazgul, and I think there's a memory of it in Gollum's recollection. Gollum's tortured hands, I think, are the sort of final memory of Trotter's tortured feet. No, Hrothgar, I'm not suggesting he went back to look for his original feet. But yeah, now it is possible, Tony, that he's had more than one encounter. That's conceivable. I don't know. But like being in and around Gondor, doesn't necessarily mean that you've tread the deadly flowers of Morgul Vale itself, right? I mean, like, let's face it, you have to have a reason to go into the Morgul Vale, right? Prior to the downfall of Sauron. I mean, honestly, need a reason after too, but you need a really compelling reason to go into the Morgul Vale. And coming back, Tony, to what you were suggesting before, it does suggest a kind of desperation, right? That he couldn't just give up. He knows how important it is to find Gollum in order to try to understand what is the Ring of Power. But of course, the fact that he's searching the entrances to Mordor suggests the follow-up, right? He's not just looking for abstract evidence of what the ring is. He's looking for evidence that Gollum has been in, right? Does Sauron know about the ring? So yeah, worth treading the deadly flowers of Morgul Vale for, even though that's gonna mess you up. I myself kind of doubt that he had ever been there before this time, because again, it's just not a thing you generally do. As Edith says, it's not like it's on the way to anything. Well, it is on the way to Barad-dûr from that direction, right? There is a pass there, which he obviously knows. I mean, Aragorn obviously knows that that's an entrance into Mordor itself, I would think. Yeah, and I agree, Lupilia, it doesn't change the fact that Minas Morgul is their lair. Yes, absolutely. I don't know that he has to be captured. I think it's unlikely he was captured by the Nazgul. He would have had to be captured and escape, and that seems... I don't think that that's what happened, right? But even just being there in Morgul Vale, being within the reach of the power of the Nazgul like that I think is enough to explain the shuddering fit that comes upon him in The Prancing Pony. Yeah. Well, I'm thinking about his travels at the end of his time as Thorongil too, Tony. But again, he was traveling down into the south. I mean, he was headed down to Harad and on further south. I think that I still doubt Morgul Vale was on his agenda there. Again, he is not just going to go there for funsies, just like to explore. I think so. But anyway, okay. Good. It is possible, Matt, that this was the end of the paths that Gandalf and Aragorn were planning to search together. That is definitely possible. And Matt, I agree. Matt Shaw, it is amazing that Gollum lived long enough to be questioned in Mordor, though doubtless he was taken straight there, right? That he did not just wander in, right? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's keep going. I agree with, I forget who it was, Tony, I think, maybe again, had been saying that it's not so much Aragorn's skill as a tracker that leads him to Gollum, but providence that leads him to Gollum. And I certainly agree with that. In fact, I would even go so far as saying not only is that clear, right? Not only is it clear that he, you know, it's not that he tracked Gollum down in the end. He gave up, right? And then happened across his trail on the way home, right? And he himself admits that, right? And then by fortune, I came suddenly on what I sought. Aragorn seems to emphasize, I too despaired at last and I began my homeward journey. And then by fortune, I came suddenly on what I sought. He seems to set it up that way, really in order to, like, not take any credit, essentially, or even to emphasize that it was providence that led him. It is a mini eucatastrophe, Sam. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So again, I think then by fortune, I came suddenly upon what I sought. I think he's speaking in a, you know, in a code that everybody there can understand. This is not quite the same as a prophetic dream, right? With a poem that begins in the imperative mood, such as came to Faramir and to Boromir, but he's, I think, making in its way a similar statement, right? As soon as I stopped looking, I came across by fortune, and this is a remarkable piece of luck, that he not only crosses Gollum's path, but right after Gollum had been by. So yeah, I think that Aragorn himself is not only not claiming credit, but that he's giving credit where it deserves and showing, like, yes, I was, Gollum was provided for me, right? Not the other way around. No, yeah, the other way around. He was provided for Gollum, which definitely is not how Gollum would describe the event. Absolutely. Yeah, Gilgonther, I agree. The ramifications of that fortunate act changed the future of Middle-earth, and it only happens when Aragorn had given up the chase. Yeah, yeah. Absolutely. Yes. Now, Scudo is wondering, if he had not seen Gollum before, how did he know he'd found Gollum? Well, he didn't. What he said, you know, but he found what he was seeking. And what he was seeking was the marks of soft feet beside a muddy pool. He sees tracks, which are not the tracks of an orc, which are not the tracks of a man, and so, which are consistent with the description of Gollum, right? And pursues it, and of course confirms that it is, in fact, Gollum. And as Fortatala says, Gollum has that useful self-labeling feature. It's true. If he says anything at all, you're likely to know who he is, right? Yeah. Exactly. Tony was thinking the same thing. Yeah. Exactly. Let's see. He also says, I was not gentle. Karita, I wonder, I'm not saying that statement is as much of an understatement as the he will never love me, I fear, right? But I think there's some understatement in I was not gentle also. I think that Aragorn is pretty firm with Gollum. I think that I would suspect that there are some beatings involved. Again, I think he would have had to. Gollum would come after him. If he couldn't escape, Gollum would be like a cornered rabid weasel or something, apparently. I mean, I mean, one of you was joking that Aragorn is lucky to have all of his fingers, but like, yeah, no joke. No joke. I mean, he is. He is. I mean, a bite from God. I mean, this is not like getting bitten by a 2-year-old, which, by the way, can leave some nasty marks, I can tell you. But it's. I mean, this is Gollum is perfectly capable, as we all know, of biting somebody's digits off, right? So yeah, absolutely. Bye bye, Ring of Bari here, says Valamoinen. Exactly. Yeah. No, I mean this is yeah, as good as Sharon says, Gollum eats orcs for breakfast. Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is not a like a, you know, it's tempting to think of it in terms of, I mean, this is the kind of thing that would be really hard to depict on screen without making it just look like child abuse, right? Because of the difference in stature between the two of them, right? But that's not the situation here, right? Gollum is a strong, deadly, fierce creature with sharp teeth and who's not afraid to use them. And Evil Dr. Cannon, I agree, he's slimy too, which means, I think that's probably why Aragorn mentions it. I mean, it is a kind of a colorful detail. But I mean, to imagine how hard to hold he would be. I mean, it's not like he can just like grab him firmly but gently, right? I mean, seriously, what is he meant to do? What can he do? How can he possibly capture Gollum without force? He couldn't possibly. How could he hold him without force? How could he restrain him without hurting him? I don't think he could. I think that you know, grabbing him, putting him in a very painful hole and beating him into submission is the only way to get this done. Arden Crayon says it's harder to keep an enemy captive than it is to kill him. Absolutely. Absolutely. Tora Marthin says, inhibitions? What are those? Yeah. Yeah, no, seriously, Gollum would have no restraint in what he would be doing. And he is strong and ferocious. And yeah, I mean, it's, yeah, JJ says it would be like trying to capture a wild wolf. Right, with your hands. You don't have a net or anything, right? And then hold it and then drag it along with you and don't let it bite you, right? I mean, it's yeah. So I don't in any way, I would not judge Aragorn for beating Gollum. I can't see how he has any alternative. But I mean, this is what a, I mean, in this weeks, every day and every night for weeks, trying to keep an eye on him and keeping him tied up, and then what, like untying him at the feet, and like he's gonna bite you all the time. He's got to gag him just to keep his teeth off him at all times. I mean, yes. And Tony, I certainly agree. Aragorn does not seem to reflect with any affection on the violence involved in this, right? I mean, this is a bad job all the way around, right? Yeah. It's no, there's no question that this trip was a deeply unpleasant trip for absolutely everybody. Would Elvish rope be more anathema to Gollum than plain old Hobbit rope? Yeah, I think so. How long would it take to reach Mirkwood? Oh man, Tony. Mirkwood. I mean, a while. They were boating for several days from Lorien down to the ford. I don't remember the distances. I mean, I can't remember off the top of my head like how many miles it would be from the Dead Marshes. The Dead Marshes, not even Rauros, but the Dead Marshes, all the way up around the Emmenmuil, and then up around Lothlorien, right, and up into Mirkwood. 50 days or so, says Appendix B. That I can easily imagine. Yeah, I mean, month and a half of this every day, right? Unbelievable. And then like the, taming him until he was tamed by lack of drink and food, right? And that's the only, when finally he was so desperate to eat and drink that he would agree to not bite him as soon as he took the gag off. And then what? Then you let him eat and drink. Oh, and I'm sure after that he was like, two of them got along, no, they wouldn't. He wouldn't, right? He would have to go through the whole process of gagging him again, doubtless, right? Yeah, I'm sure they came to a benevolent mutual understanding at that point, Sam. No, it's just like time to catch the greased pig again, the biting pig, and tie it up. My goodness. So yeah, it's just pretty horrible. To think about that. And yeah, as Tony says, Frodo wasn't with him that long. Yeah, Aragorn's trip with Gollum is the longest period of time that anybody ever spends with Gollum. Since Deagle, that is. So yeah. Interesting. Arden Crayon says, we've seen that Strider initially underestimated the hobbits, so he may have underestimated Gollum as well. May have done. Yeah, Arden. I mean, I assume that's one of the reasons why he, when Aragorn says, nothing more did I ever get from his mouth than the marks of his teeth, I assume he means that quite literally, that like he still to this day bears scars from when Gollum bit him. I assume that that's in fact what happened. He may well have have underestimated the ferocity, strength, will of Gollum. Yeah. Now again, yeah, and as Aslan's Compass says, the hobbits would look softer. Yeah, he wouldn't underestimate them in the same way, right? Gollum certainly doesn't look like a fainting flower or anything, but that doesn't mean that he might not have misunderstood him in some important ways. Yeah. Interesting. For Thoughtless says, it's quite striking. If anything, you'd expect his experience with Gollum would have prepared him better for the toughness of the hobbits. Perhaps, but that's only if he... I'm not sure Aragorn really connects the two. Does he really see that fully? Does he think of... And anyway, I would say... I don't know. I'm not sure how much Aragorn necessarily processes that. Maybe he does. Yeah, Aslan's Compass, that's what I'm thinking. Does he even have that information? Does he stick around for Gandalf's interrogation? It sounds like he does. But Gandalf came and endured long speech with him. Which is not the same as saying, but then Gandalf came and I was the heck out of there, right? I mean, boy... I did not stick around. I'm like, see you, Gandalf. Glad you're here. Bye now, right? He doesn't say anything like that. He talks about Gandalf enduring long speech with him, so I assume that he came too. But I also assume that he did not stick around. I believe Aragorn to be wise enough to know that his presence at the interrogation session is unlikely to facilitate... He's already cast himself as bad cop, right? And so he's going to let Gandalf play good cop, which, of course, as we know, doesn't pan out. Yeah. Exactly. And Turambar, I agree. Gollum has spent some 500 years roaming the Misty Mountains. Who knows how that's changed him. Yeah. I mean, I think that it is one thing to say that Gollum was originally connected to Hobbit kind. I think it's easy. It's possible. Let me put it that way. I think it's possible to overemphasize the connections there. Again, I'm not saying that there are no connections, and I'm not saying that it's not important. It is thematically important, especially once we get to book 4. It will become quite important. But I'm not sure how literally important it is. That is, there are several ways in which Gollum and the hobbits of the Shire even if they sort of share common ancestry, are pretty far apart from each other now, right? So again, I think it is possible to overdo the sense of the connections there. Yeah. Yeah, good. Tony points out that he also needs to get back to Eriador. He has to watch over the Shire. Yeah, he's been gone for a while, so I don't know how long he sticks around. Of course, he will have had time since then to learn that Gandalf endured long speech with him. So, that doesn't necessarily mean that he stuck around the whole time. Yeah. Anyway, okay. I brought him there at last and gave him to the elves, for we had agreed that this should be done. So he and Gandalf had agreed that Gollum would be brought back to the elves of Mirkwood. Which is interesting. Yeah, Renroos, that's exactly the question that I find interesting. Why Mirkwood and not Lothlorien? Lothlorien is closer, right? You'd think they'd be at least as capable of taking care of him there. We know Mirkwood has dungeons. Yes, I agree. So maybe that's it, right? They've got these useful cells that they could put him in. I don't know. I mean, we know that Gollum has some particular issues with Lothlorien. But I don't know that they have any reason, Gandalf and Aragorn have any reason to suspect that. Like the kind of reaction Gollum has when the elf rope is tied around him. Would Aragorn and Gandalf know that that was going to happen? It's hard to imagine that they would allow that. That they would know that, rather. Sorry. Evil Dr. Cannon says, because Tolkien hadn't thought of Lothlorien when he wrote this. More plausible. Definitely more plausible. Yeah, Sharon was asking the same thing. No, it wasn't. But again, this is changeable, right? That's a changeable situation. I know if he changed it, right? If he made Gollum imprisoned in Lothlorien retroactively, then it would eliminate Legolas's one contribution to the council, right? Yeah. Separately, we were talking about the borders of Lorien being closed and not allowing Gollum in. Yeah, but it's not the question. The question isn't would they allow Gollum in? Like, would they let him wander in? No, they wouldn't let him wander in. The question, rather, is would they let Aragorn in with a prisoner? And I think yes. I think they would. If Aragorn came and he's like, I've got this prisoner. He's kind of a jerk. Watch out, he bites. Sorry, he smells bad. Can you help me hang on to him? Is there a lonely flet that you can tie him on or whatever? I don't know. Then would they let him in? Yeah. Do I see them turning Aragorn back at the border? No, I don't see that happening. Yeah. It seems rather the elves of Mirkwood have been involved in this story, that is, the Gollum story and the hunt for Gollum story, from the beginning. Yeah, I think... He doesn't want to irritate his future in-laws by dumping Gollum on them. There you go. There you go. Yeah. Yeah. Sam is thinking the same thing. Thranduil has an outstanding warrant. Exactly. 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 Marielle is wondering if it was agreed between Aragorn and Gandalf alone, or is it agreed between Aragorn, Gandalf, and the Elven King? Because they did go there first, searching for Gollum and tracking him. Yeah, Marielle, I like that best. Remember that this adventure started in Mirkwood, right? And presumably with the elves' help. The elves of Mirkwood were presumably helping them during the Mirkwood phase of the search for Gollum as they were trying to figure out where he went and what happened to him. So in the interest of kind of closing the loop, let's bring him back so that the elves can know that we've found him, right? And they've already agreed to help with Gollum so they can, yeah. He's also... I want to be careful saying this because this could come out wrong. But he's also sort of their responsibility. Or like in their jurisdiction, WKU, as you say. Yeah. I don't just mean because like they have a right to imprison him just because he used to live near Mirkwood. But rather, he stayed in Mirkwood. He committed crimes in Mirkwood. Right? I mean, he was a legitimate evil of the Forest of Mirkwood while he was there. And so, I mean, he has, yeah, Matt Shaw was just thinking the same thing. Gollum has made himself wanted for his Mirkwood crimes. That's exactly what I'm thinking. If anybody has a kind of right to hold Gollum in prison, Thranduil's got a claim, right? Yeah, I'm less worried. Several people have been talking about the damage that he could do, like that, you know, by bringing him to Lothlorien, and you're kind of bringing a stain upon Lorien. I don't think so. I don't think that Gollum's the presence of one deeply unhappy and spiritually corrupted and physically warped and unpleasant and modestly malodorous small person into Lothlorien is going to really be a difference maker when it comes to the sort of spiritual purity of the place. I think Galadriel's got that. I think that Galadriel can overcome any influence of Gollum as readily as the wonderful smells of Lothlorien could probably drown out Gollum's stench. Yeah. She is modestly stain resistant to Oramarth, and I agree. But what makes more sense to me is, again, to kind of close the judicial loop, right? What are they going to do afterwards with Gollum, Aragorn, and Gandalf? What are they going to do with him afterwards? They're going to interrogate him, right? Because they need to know about where he got his ring. But what about then? Right? What do they let him go? They kill him? We know Gandalf's not a fan of that, right? Well, they're not going to just want to let him go either, though. So what do? Turn him over to the authorities. The authorities who have a judicial claim on him, right? Because he has committed heinous crimes in Thranduil's kingdom, right? The fact, Sam, that it's a further proximity to Mordor can't hurt. But again, I don't think it can be just a proximity thing. Lothlorien is also a fair bit from Mordor. And again, in my mind, the security of having him under Galadriel's care would seem to kind of overrule that, right? That is, the additional miles between Lothlorien and Mirkwood seem to me to be less important than the security of the borders, comparative security of the borders. But again, if we think it through in the sense of what's the long-term plan with Gollum, right? And it's clear, Marielle, as you say, life without possibility of parole, right? But who could do that and why? Thranduil can do that, has the right to do that, and has the willingness to do it, because Gollum has committed crimes worthy of death within Mirkwood himself. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, was there never going to be any chance of parole, right? Was there, you know, did everybody, Aragorn, Gandalf, Thranduil, and everybody all agree that Gollum must be imprisoned for life no matter what? Well, I don't know that it matters, but clearly he should be in prison until either Sauron is overthrown or Sauron conquers us, one or the other. And, you know, that's going to be long before Gollum would get off for good behavior anyway. Yeah, I think that's true. And Sam, this also does contextualize the way that the elves treated him, right? As you say, they did treat him rather nicely, right? And Tony, you're right that Gandalf still hoped for a cure, or rather thought that it might be possible for him to be cured. And I wonder if that's not another reason that he wanted to leave him with the elves, because it would be better for him. The best case scenario for Gollum, leaving him on his own is not the best case scenario. The best case scenario for Gollum is leave him with the elves. Let him live with the elves and see if they can help to effect the cure. And Sam, again, coming back to your point about how gently the elves treated him, I think that we can see some evidence, perhaps, that they did not see their role as merely punitive, right? They were not just his jailers. They were not just his punishers. I think it's quite possible that they saw themselves in an actively rehabilitatory position in relationship with Gollum, which of course is what led to the disaster. Yeah. Fourth Dauntless says, is there any evidence that Gollum can still die a natural death? He hasn't had the ring for nearly 80 years, but he apparently hasn't aged significantly. We have no idea when or if Gollum would die of old age naturally. Yeah, no idea. Yeah. Lupilia points out that there is, of course, a defense for treating Gollum better than the dwarves anyway, is that the dwarves, who also, let's admit, their imprisonment wasn't that long. I mean, it was not indefinite. And they were still stonewalling the Elven King and wouldn't tell him anything. Whereas, as Lupilia points out, Gollum had already given all the information, right? Anyway, yes, Turambar, technically burning in a volcano is a natural death. That's true. That's true. But I think it's not what was meant there. Anyway, okay. Good. It is a death by natural causes, in a sense. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Gandalf came and endured long speech with him. I like that final comment by Aragorn. Notice that the comment that he makes. So hang on a second. Cecilia was asking, speaking of rope, how did the elves of Mirkwood control him without the use of rope if Aragorn couldn't? They have something that Aragorn doesn't have. A prison cell, right? I mean, they can, remember, they don't have the issues that Aragorn had with feeding and watering Gollum. The elves can treat him much more humanely, right? They can let him loose in the cell, and they can put food and water in there so that he has plenty of food and water, right? And they don't have to worry that as soon as they try to let him drink, he's going to bite them because he's on the other side of the bars, right? So that's I think they have a lot more. Does it mean they don't use rope? I bet they do. When they took him outside, they let him climb up the tree, but they had to get him to the tree. I bet they tied him up when they did so. We're not told that explicitly, but again, I think it's. I like to think that the elves of Mirkwood were not merely completely suckers. And as Fourth Dauntless says, it's not like they did completely control him. I mean, he did in fact escape. Yeah. Now, Veronica, he can't eat lembas, but there would be plenty of other things that they would have to feed him. In fact, I can't imagine them feeding him lembas, in fact. Lembas is pretty special. You give away lembas to eat under special circumstances, right? It's an important gift, and not everybody gets it. Not even everybody who might kind of need it or want it gets it. So they certainly wouldn't just randomly feed it as rations to a prisoner. But yeah. So they would have plenty of good solid food that they could give to Gollum there. And yes, it's true that only queens give it out. Sorry. Attempted to say, are we sure there's no queen in Mirkwood? I mean, she's not mentioned, but that doesn't mean anything. Yeah, no, it's, and in addition, Praise, you're absolutely right. In addition to its being special food, it's also trail food. So even, it's unlikely that the elves even eat lembas sitting around, even on, special occasions or something like that. Yeah. Yep, exactly. And as Michael points out, we know from the barrels that they have plenty of other foods. Yep, apples, butter, yeah, all the good stuff. Exactly. Wine, yes. More wine, as Angrist says. Absolutely. But anyway, getting back to the other thing that I liked about the final turn of phrase there from Aragorn, is Gandalf came and endured long speech with him. He could end by complimenting Gandalf on his persistence, ingenuity, right? I couldn't get anything out of Gollum at all, right? He wouldn't tell me anything. Doubtless Aragorn tried, right? I'm sure it occurred to him at some point in the month and a half that Aragorn was traveling with Gollum to try to get some information out of him, right? It's not like he had a whole lot else to do with his time during that month and a half. So probably he tried to strike up a conversation on one or two occasions, tried to ask pertinent questions in order to find out some information so that whenever he finally did get Gollum to Mirkwood, he could just hand him over and say, would you incarcerate this guy, please? I've already gotten all the information that we need. But he never gets anything from his mouth but the marks of his teeth. So he could turn and be like, Gandalf, by contrast, was, oh man, he was really good. He got Gollum to talk right away. But he doesn't answer that, right? He doesn't say it that way. Instead, he says Gandalf came and endured long speech with him, right? What he praises Gandalf for is not successfully drawing the information from him. He praises him for putting up with Gollum's speech, right? Which I think is interesting. Gandalf came and endured long speech with him. Remember, Gandalf himself admitted that the enduring of long speech was not trivial, right? He called it wearisome, right? Remember when he gave a sample of Gollum's talk and says to Frodo, I don't imagine you want any more of it. But then said that he had many weary days of it, by contrast. And I agree, Matt. Nothing more did I ever get from him does imply that he tried. Absolutely. Yeah. Exactly, Sam. You have to sift his words. So when he was doing all of this sifting. Yeah, For Thoughtless says, I'm now thinking of Gollum being like a serial killer. He can't help talking about himself, but it's hard to sift out the true bits. Yeah, well, serial killer, yes, sure, if the shoe fits. Yeah, you know, and with the sifting of the words, yes. Yeah, Mike, I agree. That one word, endured, says something about Gandalf, something about Gollum, and something about Aragorn. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's a very, I find that a very evocative rhetorical choice on Aragorn's part there. Yeah, very good. Yeah. You guys all recognize my should I go on to the next slide face? It's a short one, so that's one argument in favor. Nah, no, not going to do it. Not going to do it. I know that you could endure many hours, but no, it's getting too late. And so I was just looking ahead, and I'm like, yeah, no, there's several things I want to talk about here. So no, we'll save this, but we will do, my goal next week is to do 2 entire slides. See, the key to doing more slides per class is to make shorter slides, clearly. Yeah, but you're right, Matt. We did officially reach this slide, even though we didn't actually talk about that. Yep, exactly. Shorter slides with bigger font, and we get through more slides per class, and I feel like we're going faster. Here we go. All right. We will stop here, and we'll come back to this. Next week. Wait, pausing to make sure that's true. Yes, it is true. Next week. That's right. We have class straight through until the 18th of August or whatever the Tuesday is of that week. Yeah. Okay. So we'll be straight through. Next Tuesday will be right before the beginning of Myth Moot. So exciting. Okay. Thanks, everybody. So I'm going to say goodbye to the folks on Twitter, and everyone else is welcome to join me. Everyone, indeed, including the people on Twitter, are welcome to join me on Twitch, twitch.tv/SignumU, for our field trip tonight. So thanks, everybody. And we are switching over. Okay. Okay, now unfortunately, Valoria is sick again, or sort of still. So I'm not going to have Valoria with me today, but we're going to head back to the Rift. So let's see if we can meet up let's meet at the Stable Master at the Rift, because I'm gonna port to Gathforthnear and then stable my way over there, I think. Okay. All right. Hang on. Let me expand things here. Yes. Poor Valori needs some needs some Athelas. She had a sinus infection, which became like a lung infection. Okay, moved down and became a respiratory infection. So she's still not able to join us, unfortunately. Okay. Oh, so Bricktails, the Rift. It's a place in Angmar, in the game. It's a very interesting thing. So this dates back, of course, from the... oh, wait, hang on. I can't go from here? Rats. Or is this it?
Orleans camp.
It is Orleans camp. Okay. Okay. All right. Making me worried there for a second. So this dates from the time when this was the end game. Like, so when Lotro was first released, all of this stuff, the stuff up here in Angmar was the end game material, and so this was one of the last big raids that could happen in the game, and so they invented this thing, and there's no hint of anything like this in the book, of course, but this is one of the places in Lotro where they have done what I think is a really fascinating kind of subspecies of adaptation, where you're not adapting something that's directly from the book, but you are inventing a story and sort of fitting it to the kind of thing that happens in the book. And yes, Mariel, Chris Pearson did say that he had to veto a horrifying story idea originally here. Yes. Yes. In fact, Mariel, as I'm recalling, this is the one where Chris Pearson said that he actually had to threaten to set someone's desk on fire in order to prevent and what he was attempting to prevent was a love story between an elf and a Balrog. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Yes. Anyway, so, but like I said, I'm really interested. So the idea here, as we learn, well, wait a second. Let's hang on, and we'll talk about the in-game story here later. I want to finish what we started doing last time, and that is looking around without thinking about the story and just seeing what we can learn from stuff. So let's look at this tower here, which I entered in order to find the stable master last time. I didn't really look at. We have banners. Got the 7-pointed stars. But
they're pointed upright.
They're pointed up. Exactly. That's the problem. They're not Numenorian stars. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't see upward pointing 7-pointed stars elsewhere, because we do, even on some ruins. But it's still interesting. And notice also they are only on the banners. We don't get any stars that I can see in the stonework itself, as was, of course, as you all remember, so common. We would have gotten some in the keystone of the arch there, right? Or maybe the little scepter of Innuminus thing. We would have gotten them probably around on the edge if we hadn't got the Oyalose. The Cardalin ruins, Kitrana, absolutely, yes. That had the upward pointing star. Yes, exactly. But yeah, I'm not seeing... The only thing that we see is the sort of gilt border there. That sort of leafy border, which looks very elvish. And we were seeing that around the other sort of pediments and things that we've been seeing around the rift. So this looks like Elvish construction as well. Nothing like as... Oh, what is this? Oh, he's the burglar trader. So he's looking burglarious in order to advertise his wares. That seems a little bit counterintuitive. But anyway... Yeah. Yeah, JJ, you're right. The blade that we saw had a 4-pointed star in it. That was the only... Yeah, the only other star we've seen in stonework. Yeah, wait, there's one. I'm trying to see if I can get around far enough to see the front of it. Barely, yeah, right there, right in the middle of the guard of the sword there. Yes, that sort of 4-pointed star, and there's one on the ground also. I didn't see the one on the ground. Oh, the sword on the ground. Down further. Yeah. Wait, hang on a second. This is up above where we came down, right? Those are the orc camps that we saw. That's the path down? Where we first entered? The area? I think so. Right? That's what that is?
The path to the west is the way we came in.
Yeah, that is the way we came in. Yeah, okay. Alright. Yes. Right, okay. I'm seeing straight ahead here is the steep path with those first stone pediments that we saw, but if there was something broken off on top of them, maybe from here looks like perhaps it was even an archway, but right, and then there's the orc camps with the orcs with the bright red eyes, and the hillmen, some of whom looked intimidated and some of whom didn't, and then right again, more of those pillars or monoliths, whatever they, or statue pediments or whatever that we saw along the way. And then up in, I was at first struck by this wall, which at first I thought, which at first looked like brickwork, like there was a large wall there, but I think it's not. I think it's just striations in the rock. Yeah. Yeah, from here we can see that more clearly. Okay. Yeah, quarrying was my first thought. Like, did they quarry this? But I don't think so, because again, you can see the horizontal white lines running through it down here. So I think it's just an illusion of the fact that you've got those same sort of natural strata in the rock. Yeah, as it's on a flat face. The fact it's on a flat face makes it look like it was quarried. That's, Nancy, just what I was wondering if we would see evidence of, but I don't think so. I don't think so. Okay. Right. Oh, and there's that, yeah, you can see up there that, like, lavender boundary, right? Border there. Yep. Okay. All right. So this is just the same kind of stonework, in other words, that we've been seeing from the beginning. A couple guys bearing quests. Isn't a dwarf? Is a dwarf. Huh. Jonesy. I wonder what Jonesy's doing up here. Okay. And there's Yorellen. All right. Okay. Right from here we can look down on the seal, which which looks like a stenciled decoration I might find in my grandmother's house, to be perfectly honest. Like the little lavender flowers, right? Doesn't it look like it is like a pattern that might be made into a doily, maybe?
A Victorian doily, maybe.
Right. JJ says it reminds him of the back of a hand mirror. Yeah, it's odd. Slightly odd. It's missing a giant tea set. Exactly, right? Yes, a couple teacups and a charming little teapot would look exactly right sitting on that thing. And yes, Marielle, that's just what I'm thinking. It doesn't exactly scream runes of power. No, it does not. We can see the lateral symmetry, but it's not symmetrical. It's definitely oriented in one direction. It's not symmetrical in each way, only just in the one way. So in other words, it clearly has a top and bottom. Do we think that each one of those pediments there had one of those swords sticking up from it? Hrothgar, I don't remember seeing those flowers before. Like in that charming lilac color, I don't remember that. Yeah, Mario, I'm trying to think. Is it eastward? Hang on. It's going this way, right? Like essentially? Right? Yeah, it's eastward. It is eastward. Or I guess it could be westward, if that's the top. But it doesn't look like the top, does it? Maybe it is. Yes, maybe the eastern end, the one on the right-hand side of the screen, is the bottom. And the other side is the top. Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think you're right. I think you're right. In which case it is facing west, which does sort of make more sense. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, Pontine thinks that this design is unique to the Rift, which is almost a shame because it's really a lovely floral pattern, and I think it would be excellent on China. I think that my wife would quite appreciate a tea set in this pattern. Wouldn't it be awesome to have a tea set, a China tea set with, like, you know, a lavender floral pattern, you know, called Balrog's Prison or something like that? It would make nice wallpaper, Emma Thorne. You're right. You're right. For like a particular kind of Victorian sitting room or something. But anyway, okay. So yeah, I was asking before, do we think that each one of these pediments had one of those sword things? And on the one hand, we do get at least one fallen over and broken sword here, which suggests, which proves there was more than the one, right? And yet those columns there don't look the same as the base over here. So they were clearly not identical. They were clearly not identical to that. And since this is at the top of the, you know, spatially oriented design on the western side, it would make sense for that to be, for it not to fit, right? For them not all to be the same. How many are there? 7, yeah, right? 1, 2, 3, yeah. 3 on each side. 1, 2, 3, yeah. And I don't think there's anything down there. I don't think there's an 8th. So yeah, I think there's 7 pillars with this. So where did that sword, broken off sword bit? I mean, is there a broken off one on the eastern side?
Yeah, there is.
Is there down here? So there were 8?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Are we sure those aren't just the pointy, spiky bits?
Yeah, I believe when I looked at it last week, there were actual design elements of that main sword. It's just very broken down.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, we'll have to take a look. These pillars look like just columns. I could easily imagine, as somebody was suggesting. Who was suggesting this? I don't remember. But anyway, somebody was suggesting that it could well have been like arches covering over. But you'd think there'd be more evidence of arches. But then again, there isn't always that much remaining evidence of collapsed arches and things, as one would think. The stones don't always just hang around. All right, we'll have to look down there. So if it's one of each of the 8 cardinal points of the compass, are these ones in the middle? I guess they are. The middle one. I mean, is that really at exactly 90 degrees to the sword? I guess it is. I guess it is. No, Aranos, I'm not seeing you. I think we're too far away to resolve characters down that far. We can see the landscape. We can't really see the characters down there. Okay. Other things to observe from above. We'll come down in a second and join you, Aranos. Other things to observe from above. The crack, right? The crack that goes through the China plate extends into the ground, right? That is, it looks like, I mean, there seems to be a roughly matching and therefore presumably roughly contemporaneous chasm there, right in the ground. Which presumably is the... See, it's hard because I can't absolutely forget what this place is, right? I know that this, you know, China disc that we're looking at is the seal of the prison of a Balrog. But I kind of wish I could forget that. Because no, I'm sure. I was going to say I don't think, but no, I am positive I would never have guessed that. If you just brought me here without telling me anything before I played the game and I was looking down and trying to guess what did that used to be, I'd have guessed a lot of things. I do not think I would have guessed Balrog Prison. Probably the lilacs would have thrown me off by themselves, honestly. It just does not look like a prison. A dance floor, Aranos, yes, that I could have gone with. Absolutely. I might have guessed that. Yeah. Interesting. Angrist says if you put the west at the top, it kind of looks reminiscent of the door to Moria. A little bit. You know, the mere fact, Angrist, that it does have that lateral symmetry, right, does suggest a pair of doors that could open and that are closed, right? So it has, like, the vaguest of suggestions that it's like doors that are closed. But honestly... no, I never would have guessed that. Never would have guessed that. An amphitheater, Hrothgar, it looked, yeah, that I could have seen. I'm not sure I would have gone with amphitheater because there's not enough seating, right? But, you know, I mean, you could seat people along the path winding up, but that's not really good. Fire Swans suggest that maybe somebody took the sign, "Caution, Balrog." Yes, that would have been one of the more sensible things to inscribe on the disc, perhaps. Yeah, no, it's not Angmarin Stonehenge, Angrist, because it's Elvish, right? I mean, we've seen Stonehenge-y things, even in Angmar, right? I mean, we've seen evidence of the ancient monolithic constructions of the most ancient people who still have any, of whom the valley still obviously retains memories, right? And those are in the Imlad Balhorth, but this is obviously not that. So JJ, the fact that the sword is not quite centered, JJ is really bothering him, and Aranos says it's just to annoy the OCD among us. I think that's meant to be a deliberate reflection of the fact that it's broken. My suspicion is that when the seal was closed, when the circle was complete, and before that crack opened up in the ground, it was in the very middle. I have to think that. Or I'll go mad. No, that's my suspicion. Yeah. Right, Hrothgar. It does look a little bit like a heliopad, so conceivably it could be a landing pad, but of course, as you say, obviously, not for Balrogs. If it were for Balrogs. Now, though, being under as handy a cliffside as this, you could be intended to hurl Balrogs off of this cliff, and so it could be like a sort of target, right? Hurl Balrogs in this direction, but it's a little far out. You'd have to really loft them quite a bit, and I don't know how much heft you could really get under a Balrog. I mean, just getting it to topple over the edge seems like challenge enough, to actually get any air under the Balrog when you chuck it out, I think would probably be more than is reasonable to ask. I think, yeah. Edith says, and if you thought Gollum was tough to wrangle. Exactly.
So we're going to call this one Yeeting Balrogs?
Yeeting Balrogs, exactly. Yeah, yeet Balrog here. Exactly. Yep. And no, Balrogs do not bounce. I think that's plainly, if not explicitly, attested in the documents. Yeah. Exactly. Okay, let's go down and see what we can make of these ruins again closer down now that we've seen. Oh, we got to go through. We can't go around that way. Anything else we can see through? What's this? What's this stripy thing? Roof? What's an ember eagle? Is that somebody's pet? Or is it just hanging here?
It's the Lore Master's pet.
Really?
Yeah, the Lore Master Trader's right here.
Well, yeah, but I've played a Lore Master and I didn't get an ember eagle.
You didn't get the right books then.
Fair enough. Anyway, sorry. Before I was distracted by the ember eagle, again, I was looking at this stripy piece of stone here and looking for, because I didn't see anything that really matched that in the standing architecture. That we see another part of it here. I wonder if that suggests, and notice how it's curved and it's got the gold border below it. I wonder if that suggests that that's what, like, maybe the vaulting of the ceiling was meant to be. It
looks like a piece of the if you look toward the arch, toward the top of the arch, it's the same pattern there.
It's not exactly the same. Well,
A little bit. Like a thick black stripe and a thinner black stripe.
no, but they don't even have the gold along there. No.
Well, not the arch itself, but the border around the arch that's going around the circumference of the tower.
Oh, that border. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
The main border. Yeah, sure. But the point is these are curved. And
Like the tower.
well, yeah, but they're not curved in that direction. They're curved this way, like archy wise, not the mirror concavity of the tower. If so, when separated, those lines would be on the... I don't think so. I don't think so. It's besides...
True, because you can see a cut section of that pattern on the side of the wall, and it's definitely just plain stone.
Yeah, oh, and here we have we have a buttress here.
I'm wondering about a flying buttress, but inside. Normally they fly on the outside of buildings.
Often, yes, that is certainly true. I don't know what the plan was with this or why it was here.
And there's no flying buttress on the other side of the tower here.
Okay, see, I'm thinking it's not a buttress. I think it's a partition. If you look at the side of it here, it just looks like a partition with an internal arch right here, so that it was this used to be just like an archway that led from one. Exactly, Emma Thorne. A partition, that's what I'm going with here. I think this used to be a partition inside the tower, which extended over to here behind the Runekeeper trader dude. Right, and so this tower was divided into two rooms, essentially two sort of half-moon rooms, which communicated by this arch over here. That's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm thinking. Which is interesting in itself. I don't remember seeing a tower, like a rounded tower like this with a partition in it before, but it's a pretty big one though. The tower, I mean. The diameter of this tower is wider than, like, I'm thinking, for instance, of the round ruinous towers in Eregion, for instance, which are very, very much smaller than this. Yeah. Okay, sorry. Distracted by stripy rocks and other various things. And here's another one of those swords. Oh, right, this is, JJ, the one you were pointing to that was lying on the ground nearby. Yes, yes, definitely.
Definitely looks more like a sword here than a spear, that's for sure.
Yeah, I'm thinking sword. It's not that, I mean, the shape certainly could be a spearhead, but I think the haft is never long enough. I think it's more hilt than haft, but of course, when you're up this close, the resolution kind of fails one. I like the texturing in the four-pointed star. I'm trying to figure if there's what the other... It looks asymmetrical. And I'm trying to figure out to what extent... No, it is asymmetrical. It's not a star at all. There's a white and a black part, which I thought was just actual shadow, but it's not shadow. It's a figure with a top and a bottom. Looks like a white tower at the top and a black mountain at the bottom. Or black sails? Triangular sails on a ship? But it's definitely not... There's definitely no attempt at symmetry here. The tower has the pointy bits at the top. It's not crenellation.
I think so.
It's not crenellation. It's... Now... It looks a little bit like the tower, like a numinous tower tops. Just slightly. So I'm looking at JJ at the four-pointed star on the sort of guard of the sword here. Because it's not a four-pointed star. It's a dual image, black and white, in near symmetry, but not quite symmetry. They could be merely... Yeah, I thought they looked symmetrical too from a distance. But now that I found this one over here, no matter how close I get, the resolution is really bad when you're close up. But it's definitely not symmetrical. Now you're seeing wizard hats, Amathorn. Well, yeah, the one on the bottom looks kind of like a black wizard's hat, but it's got that line, vertical white line down the middle. Yeah, the four bumps, Nancy, are what I was first looking at, right? You've got the four bumps, two on either side of the top and bottom points there, right? Well, I guess two on either side of the sideways points as well. That was the very first thing that made... Ooh, sorry. That was the first thing that made me look twice at it, actually, Nancy, was trying to figure out what the bumps were. But...
Remember the bumps in the archway leading into the rift? That unstylish, that very functional...
Yes, the ones that look like rivets.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, but those were rounder than this. And anyway, it's part of a decoration. I mean, it's part of a... This is a work of decorative art. Wow. Huh. So we know the white part is the top and the black part is the bottom. That is, we know what the direction of this is, clearly, because it's normally standing upright, right? With the blade pointed upwards. So we know the white point is the white half is the top and the black part is the bottom. Edith says you can almost see an arrow in the white bit. See, I was wondering about the tree too, Edith, because it does look like it almost branches out enough at the top to suggest a tree. But yeah, no, the proportions are different. Notice how on the black half, the black half of it, you just get the one single vertical line down the middle, whereas the white part has this like boxy bit here, right? This rectangular overlay there in the middle. And that's what makes me think tower more than tree, because of the way it has the... If it were just sort of like a narrow bowl which spread out more like that, I would definitely be thinking more tree.
It kind of reminds me of the pier in Minas Tirith.
The pier, did you say?
Yeah, kind of how, Minas Tirith, dives into the pier and then branches out on either side.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, White Towers, I'm kind of thinking, it's hard not to think of Minas Tirith in that thing. Aranas, I agree that it looks like a dominant spire with secondary spires. I can definitely agree with that, though there's angled things as well, but I don't think it's a tree. I mean, if it's a tree, it's cut off, right? I mean, it's like it's not, the whole tree isn't in the picture there, which would seem odd, I think. But yeah. Okay. All right. Here's my interpretation of this. I'm going to go with abstract interpretation here rather than representational art. That is, rather than thinking it's depicting a particular tower or something like that we're supposed to recognize, I'm thinking symbolism here. And I'm thinking symbolism related to the function, related to the, especially since we saw that one of these swords was standing upright at the western tip, which was the top tip of the which was the top tip of the disc, right, of the seal disc. JJ, looking at your screenshot that you just posted, I can still see it in your image there. Notice the crowning bits up at the top, whereas the bottom has a very clean and sharp triangular point that comes down, and there's no similar triangular point at the top. They are, I think, designed to be nearly, it's near symmetry, but it is not exactly symmetrical. In fact, not only does it not have, even the shape isn't exactly the same. That is, the bottom part has sort of shallow shoulders, and then the you know, the triangle, sort of shark tooth triangle there, but the shoulders on the white part on the top go in further and then upwards more sharply. The shapes aren't even the same, even apart from the bits at the top and the bits at the bottom. The shape doesn't look the same. Back to my allegorical interpretation. The one thing that is perfectly clear, whatever the shape is here, the one thing that is perfectly clear is that the black and white symmetry or near symmetry is clearly deliberate. And that certainly seems conspicuous under the circumstances. If we are talking about a place where the, hey, kite's in the way. One side, kite. Thanks. I don't object to kites in general, but sorry, I just happened to be blocking the path there. Anyway, it's very conspicuous that would happen in a place where the Balrog is concealed underground. So you've got the darkness, right? The shadow and flame contained below the ground. So the horizontal line where the black and the white meet, right, would be like the disc. Like that is the boundary, right, between white and dark. And you have the sort of the pillar of strength up above, balancing the darkness below. The white and the black, it seems, almost has to be symbolic of the light and the darkness, the strength of the elves holding in check the darkness beneath. But the symmetry of the thing is itself kind of interesting. I wouldn't have expected them to adopt that kind of imagery. Now, again, maybe it has nothing to do with the particular occasion, perhaps. I mean, that is to say, it is possible. And here we can go ahead and let's head down, and we can look at some of these things down below too. It's possible that that's like the symbol of somebody's house, you know, which just happens to sort of also fit the occasion in a sense, but it certainly seems too. Oh, wait, hang on a second. This is an interesting moment from an architectural standpoint. It seems a little bit too on the nose not to be relevant. Okay, so here's what I'm looking at. The one on the right is clearly a shield and sword thing. Like, this obviously had one of those swords up on top, And the one on the left presumably did too. This is highly suggested by the fact that one of the broken swords is right there on the ground next to it, right, as if it just fell off it. What I'm interested in looking at here is the base of this pillar, right? Square base with the sort of peach edge there, like the green stripe and the peach edge, and then that black filigree work around it, right? And then we can see the black squares, because I think, if I'm recalling correctly, that's what all of those, yep, I think so, what all of these pediments around the edge of the disc all look like. Yeah, just exactly like that. Except, wait a second, the other one up there didn't have the lavender. Did I miss the lavender? Hang on. Just checking for lavender, because this is important. Gotta always base on internal evidence if you can. Okay, yep, see, there's the lavender up on top. This one doesn't have it. Where's the lavender? It's got this black filigree instead. Huh. They're not the same. They're not symmetrical. Notice that the point of the shield comes all the way down to the very top, which would explain why this is broken off all the way down there, because the entire shield fell off. Huh. Interesting. Okay, sorry. Now let's go down and look. Had to compare, had to make that one last comparison there. Because
there's a sword and shield over in this orc camp.
Yes. Yeah, I think all of these. Yeah, we see it comes down the same all the way down to the lavender and gold. Green stripe around the bottom. Now. Alright, but hang on. So on the one hand, these other pediments, what have you, look very similar. This one okay. Ah. Okay, Emily. Oh, very good. Emily has an extreme close-up there. And yes, the 4 dots are not symmetrical.
Interesting.
They're definitely not symmetrical. They're wider apart at the top. Yet, JJ, you were noticing that same thing. And we'll come back to that. Okay, this has the black. This doesn't have the lavender. This has the black filigree instead, like that other one. I guess they just didn't make them all the same way. These have the
They didn't.
further up. But here's the other thing. It's the shields, right? So this other one next to the path that has the shield again on the inside, like the one up the slope that we were looking at. And the other one up the slope was broken off down to the base because we could see where the shield was broken off. But this one doesn't look like it lost its shield. It had no shield attached to the front of this. In fact, not only that, we see that this has filigree work over where the shield would have been. So unless they put the black filigree on the stone and then put the shield over top of it, you know, which is like, you know, sort of like an extreme version of repainting behind the couch. Yeah. Yeah. So my first thought when we were coming down the hill and we were looking at those 2 broken pediments on the way down, I was thinking that maybe we were in fact seeing evidence that every single one of these did have the sword, so that there were 8 swords all around the edge at all of the cardinal points here. But now I'm doubting that again, because these don't have shield spaces or evidence of the shields. Either on the front face or on the sides, like this one has the shield as like almost wings, and I almost just like fell into the cliff because I was looking upwards as I was running across. But no, there also you would see it. See, no, this one is not on the sides. It's actually on the front half. In fact, look here, you can see the cross section really well here. The shield just faces out a different way. It doesn't face in, it faces out. And you can see how it's actually built into the side of the stone here, right? It's not just against the face. It's actually built into it. So that means that although this shield down here at the, southeastern corner, this shield faces in, the one on the western side faces out. And none of the others had inward facing shields. Although this scrap on the ground over here is a shield. So it seems to have been somewhere. Outward facing, perhaps? No, this has got filigree all the way down.
Yeah, the pillars without the lavender at the bottom, I'm actually standing on the only one that's not broken, and it's a flat top.
That one's a perfectly flat top?
Yeah, I mean, it looks like broken brickwork on the top, like, you know, plaster, but it is definitely a straight flat top.
So you're thinking that that one that you're standing on was not broken?
Yeah, or else it had a plinth or something on top of it, or maybe just plaster on the top that, you know, weathered away, but didn't actually break the shape of the column itself.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and then there's these, the pyramidal things, which again look exactly like the dwarf pyramids. Huh.
I posted a screenshot of it.
Right, actually that looks like the cross section here, doesn't it? Is this what the top of that looks like? Okay. I'm going to try to get closer to this without falling in. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I've got to think that that symbol, that white and black thing, has got to be a symbol of the rift, especially the way that it's a symbol of the seal, especially the way that it's contained within the ring there. But you'd think that maybe, oh, I don't know, maybe that symbol would appear instead of the lavender china pattern on the rift, on the seal, which has been rifted. Huh. All right, let's it's late. I want to just go down here. So we can't go too far in, right? Without the quests? What the heck? Who built this? Who built this? A drunken dwarf? What even the heck? Look at those designs in those rectangles. What is that? It looks almost like dwarven knotwork, except it isn't. It's all asymmetrical and chaotic and weird. Who does that? Nobody does that.
It's not even like the designs in the Barrow Downs, you know, which were like, you know, earlier men's work.
Right, like the swirlies. Yeah, exactly. No, we've not seen... That's unique. We've not seen that anywhere.
Also might explain why the doily pattern is seen nowhere else in game. It's also unique. I remember Ponton saying earlier that he couldn't recall it being anywhere else in the game.
Yeah, exactly.
To be fair, it's a unique prisoner in this place, so
sure,
you know.
Absolutely, but... And yeah, you know, Nancy's wondering where the heck did the stone come from? Yeah, exactly. I haven't seen any reddish-brown stone anywhere for quite some distance.
And it's embedded in the obsidian.
Yeah. Perhaps it confounds evil spirits. I mean, it's confounding me, so I don't like to think that, but...
It confounds art historians too, Emma Thorne.
Yeah. Well, I'm wondering why it should.
But why would it have the symbol of the Iron Crown?
Well, the banner of the Iron Crown was presumably put up by the hillmen who were here. You know, I mean, this area is still kind of the frontier. You've got the, you know, the Dunedain camp up the hill, Dunedain/elf camp up the hill, and you've got the orc camps down, you know, t'other side of the ridge there. So this is
Could the red stonework be hillman work?
I don't remember seeing anything like these kinds of designs. Not even in this category. I know that is just unlike anything I've seen. Angular. It's a relief pattern, and it's angular like dwarvish knotwork is angular. It's not smooth and rounded like the swirlies of the men or like so many of the designs of the elves. And yet it's got all these curves and random weird curves, which dwarvish stuff never has random weird curves. Oh yeah, you're right. The pattern is the same on both sides of the platform. You can see the Hrothgar's pointing out, we can see the, you know, the china plate from beneath too. It is true that most of what we've seen has been Longbeard. It could possibly be a different family of dwarves. I mean, I think we can now recognize the difference between Dour Handy and Longbeardish construction, but this is totally unlike either one. That is just bizarre. I can't go in, can I? Nope. Alright. Not gonna launch the raid. Well, on that weird note... Okay, so somebody tell me. When was this made? Do we know? Did they say in game how old this place is? Those patterns just freak me out. Yeah, I couldn't remember. I mean, I would guess Second Age. It says during the raid quest. There are all these like nearly representational things. Like I keep looking in different parts of it and thinking that I'm seeing shapes. All right. Okay, well, next week we will head to the last unexplored part of Angmar, if we can. And that's up in the Uragarth and Carn Dûm area. We'll see if we can get into Uragarth and Carn Dûm and see what we find there. Yeah.
Well, technically you haven't seen all of Ram Duath, but the stuff you haven't seen is basically landscape. So it's just pretty stuff rather than any architecture or anything you could glean from it.
Yeah. Yeah. Wait, the Ram Duath?
Yeah. When Scenario revamped Ram Duath, he put in some waterfalls and different paths, and it looks really cool, but it's nothing to really, do other than to say, oh, hey, this looks pretty, and move on.
Right. Yeah, okay. Well, we'll see. We'll see if it's possible to, get in next time. But, Okay. Anyway, all right. Sorry, I like all confounded here at the very end. So it is a weird way to finish under the circumstances, but finish we must. Thanks everybody for joining us. I will see you guys next week. We'll see what we can do in the Uragarth and Carn Dûm region for next time. And so that's what we'll try to get to next time. Thanks everybody. Thank you for joining me. See you guys next week. Bye now. Thanks for joining me on this epic exploration of The Lord of the Rings and of Standing Stone's video adaptation of Tolkien's story. If you are having even half the fun I'm having on this journey, I hope you will consider supporting the project by donating at signumuniversity.org/fund.